Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, as we like to call it, the Try-F podcast, where we try not to screw the podcast up, or F the podcast up. And today, we are going to be continuing our review of the History of Halloween, the full documentary by Post Apocalypse. I found myself particularly annoyed at this video once it got to a certain point, and we should be reaching that point in just a couple minutes. So, Cody, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I am all right. Cannot complain. Wonderful. Mr. Trevor?
I'm all right. I hope you're well.
I am as well as I'm going to get for a while. So,
then, let's do this.
Okay, let's jump in. So we are at 7:45.
The blending of Roman and Celtic customs added layers to the rituals, making them richer but also more haunted. The apple games of Pomona carried with them the weight of prophecy. The offerings to the dead of Feralia echoed the gifts to the wandering spirits of Samhain. The old fears never disappeared. They simply wore new faces. The Romans brought their sense of order, but the Celts knew that some forces could never be tamed. So Samhain, now tinged with Roman myth and ritual, continued to evolve, retaining its eerie overtones, its whispers to the dead, and its glances into the other world. It became a celebration of many masks, a union of harvest of spirits of gods both new and old, a night that grew ever more potent, a gathering of traditions that spoke not just to the living, but to those who walked just beyond the light. Now the stage was set for these blended beliefs to take yet another turn, to bend to new masters and survive in ways both familiar and strange. When the Christian church set its sights on the British Isles, it saw not only a land of tribes and kings, but also a realm rich with ancient customs, a place where the old gods still walked. The church knew that to conquer the spirit of a people, one must also conquer their festivals. And so began the Christianization of Samhain. The church, ever shrewd, sought not to erase Samhain, but to subsume it.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about. When the Romans did it, they were skilled. When the church does it, they've subsued it. And then to top it all off with this like ominous music change and the Pope who's just so pretty looking in that picture. I mean, just, you couldn't be more obvious about your bias if you tried.
Right? Yeah.
That church on there looks like the Temple of Time from Zelda.
Yeah, it's probably because the AI stole it from Zelda. Which is a whole other can of worms. The AI is not actually making anything up. It's just copying other people's work and just collaging it.
Yeah, data collage.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, honestly, this whole thing sounds like somebody typed in the history of Halloween and how the church corrupted it, and went with the story that AI come up with.
So you think maybe this whole video, including the dialogue, is AI?
Oh yeah, if you actually like dive into the AI thing, there's people that are literally typing in whatever they want, and then AI is making up these whole videos and these whole talking line, and they're about 30 minutes long, and then they just post. They don't edit it or anything.
That would make sense because this thing's repeated itself like 37 jillion times.
Yeah, this very well could be that.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I will compliment the graphics. I mean, that Pope is terrifying.
It makes cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good, but I mean, I'm not sure about the narrative content if it's necessarily there yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my big complaint. I love the change in the rhetoric. Church wants to conquer, it wants to subsume, but the Romans were skilled. They loved the Celtics. They didn't do the same thing at all. As if the Celts and the Romans were never at war.
Were they not?
No, they were at war. I think they hated each other. I think they went after each other for years.
Yeah.
I think that was like a whole big thing. You have to talk to Greg. He's the history expert on all that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what a race is. You try to win the race, right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what makes this so disingenuous, because especially at this period in time, I mean, everybody's conquering everybody constantly. The church doing the same thing, like it ain't good, but it ain't different, and it ain't particularly malicious compared to everybody else.
Yeah, that's true. It's all agreed.
Yep. Are we in agreement, Mr. Trevor?
Agreedment.
I agree.
Okay. Well, now that the verdict is in, we'll move on. 922.
In the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV introduced All Saints' Day, a feast to honour the holy martyrs and saints. Originally celebrated in May, it was later moved to November 1st, a date that aligned with Samhain.
Okay, I am going to stop here, because this is actually a theological question. So, I kind of think the Catholic Church was clever to do this, to take the pagan holidays and the pagan traditions and basically repackage them in kind of a Christian framing so they wouldn't have to like completely uproot their whole culture.
Reintegrate them.
Yeah, because I mean, the goal is to win people over to Christ. It's not to make them all wear pantsuits or dress like the Pope or whatever. I mean, you're not trying to assimilate the culture. You're trying to convert people so they can go to heaven. So if that's your goal, then it makes sense that you would basically reconfigure the culture stuff. Now, they could have been weaponizing it, I mean, obviously, but I don't think it's a bad tactic, and I thought it was probably one of the reasons why the Catholic Church took over Europe as quickly as it did. So, thoughts?
History.
History. Books, words, history, numbers.
No, I think the Romans crushed, man.
Yeah, they were
They
good at
did.
what they did.
The church has had its, those popes aren't known for nice things.
No,
Just put it that way.
no, they are not. And there's very often been more than one of them at a time, which is, put about a whole other set of problems. But you can't argue with the results, though. I mean, we're no longer doing human sacrifices, and the idea of giving fruits to spirits seems stupid, because it is. That wouldn't have happened if the church hadn't integrated those cultures and kept the good and got rid of the bad.
What makes you think that we're not, or they're still not doing sacrifices?
Well, of course, there are probably governments and, fat rich people at the, Bohemian Grove sacrificing to an owl because they think it's cool. But as far as, like, it being prominent in society and being a norm, it's not a norm anymore.
Yeah.
It's underground. I think they'd like to change that dynamic, these fat pot-bellied billionaires with nothing but time on their hands, but I think for the most part, the regular people would consider that odd. And so if these sorts of ritualistic killings happen, they have to be repackaged in a different way.
Yeah.
You have to put the babies on a stainless steel table and call it care instead of, putting them on the fires, putting them through the fires of Moloch. I'm sorry, what?
They have to make you do it, I think, is because, like, I look at the the sacrifices at, like, on the Aztec temples, right? With the eclipse and all that, they have to make you believe that they have the power, and you have to do it to yourself. Like, it's the Aztec thing was exactly the same as the jab.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Like, you have
think
to
I know
do
what
it
you're
to
talking
yourself.
about. But
It's a sacrifice, but it's you.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about, but elaborate on that concept. Why is it important that you do it, and why is it important that the community?
Because nobody has the right. Nobody has the right to make you do anything without blowback.
What kind of blowback?
Free will.
Karmic blowback.
Okay. Now, I've heard this idea talked about before, the idea that you have to get everybody to be willing participants in a crime in order for, lack of a better way to put it, like the wrath of the Almighty to fall on a country. You have to get the whole country to be in agreement on whatever evil is taking place.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So, and I've kind of had this strange theory. Maybe it's strange, but I feel like it pertains to abortion a little bit. Like, I would argue that there is a difference between arguing the safe, legal, and rare thing. Because while abortion's bad in every context, there is a difference between making people appeal to a moral calculus and then a woman in a cake going, may the Almighty bless abortions and bless America. One is people accepting a necessary evil. The other is we are going to do this as a sacrament because it's our right, and we don't care if it's right or wrong. We get to do it because we're more powerful. Yep. And I think one is a necessary evil calculus. The other is a ritual, in a sense. Everybody's getting into agreement that it's an evil, but they don't care because they're the stronger and they have the ability to do it, and therefore that gives them the right to do it. And also there is something kind of pagan about appealing to the Almighty's favor in doing this evil thing.
Appealing to the Almighty's favor.
Like when the woman popped out of the cake in that Stephen Colbert thing where she was like, God bless abortions and God bless America. Like asking the Almighty to say this is okay, like creates this kind of weird religious component to it. Does that make sense?
So crazy. Not to me, no.
Okay.
Are you talking about the Olympic thing?
No. Back. This was years ago, but
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was this comedian gal. I think it was on the Stephen Colbert show, and she popped out of a cake in one of those episodes and said, "God bless abortions and God bless America." And
God doesn't bless abortions.
No, it was an idiotic thing to say, but. Yeah. What I thought was interesting about it was a dramatic departure from the safe, legal, and rare thing that Hillary Clinton and the previous generation of Democrats did.
Yeah.
There's a very weird transition in that messaging. One is, we don't like this. We think it's bad, but it's worse if the woman has to raise a kid in poverty, and it's worse if the woman, is miserable in some capacity. Like they're basically saying that it's the lesser of two evils in the prior scenario. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's right. But that's what they were doing. They were appealing to people's better sentiments, their desire for mercy, their desire for, virtue or whatever, to do the right thing. But when you say, okay, God bless abortions and God bless America, you're no longer accepting it as the lesser of two evils. You know what I'm saying? You're saying something else. You're saying either that this is good, or you're saying that we don't really care if it's good. We're going to do it because this is our right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Which has blowback.
Yeah, right. I would say the latter would produce blowback, to your point. And there's a transition in the attitude that is appealing, trying to get the community to come into an agreement on this heinous act in a way that people might be willing to tolerate it in the other way, but not necessarily like it.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of attitude, one that I think is much darker.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what...
So does that tie to your point about getting the community to get into agreement to bring about a wrath, about having the karmic blowback, as it were, fall back on the guys pushing the message?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it goes back to, have you heard that thing about, how a football home game football team will typically win their games, not based on their skill level, but based on the energy from the crowd.
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess it would tie with that idea, but but not like hating human life like that. That's I feel like that's demon possession.
I think so too. I think the absolute contempt that you have to have for a child.
That's wild.
Baffling. I mean, I don't agree with it, but I can conceptualize the safe, legal, and rare thing. Like, I can understand why somebody would come to that conclusion. Again, don't like it, but I can see how somebody can get there. for the life of me, I don't understand why you would sit there and try to call it a good.
Yeah, promote it.
Yeah. And ask the Almighty to bless it of all things.
Yeah.
That's just crazy to me.
Like bless you with a lightning strike.
Yeah.
Clear the parasites out of you.
Yeah, no, I think there's something to that idea of the blowback concept. I'm not sure how relevant it is to our culture and our society, because this stuff about sacrifices and rituals, if that's still done, it's not done by the culture at large. Like, I don't think the culture's in agreement with anything like that yet. So,
you don't think the jabs were a sacrifice?
Well, I'm glad you brought that back up, because I'm going to ask you more about that. Do you think, in what way do you think the jabs were a sacrifice?
Because you know it's bad for you and you're still taking it.
Okay, so are you sacrificing?
Everybody knows in the back of their head. Like, why would God put us here to need vaccines? That doesn't make any sense fucking at all.
I think there is a place for technology and stuff like that, but that's not what those things are. I agree with you in a sense. I think there was this kind of, I don't know if sacrifice is the right word, but there was this getting into agreement about doing something heinous and expecting other people to do the same thing. It's kind of like, it'd be more akin to the Jonestown people killing themselves in the name of getting along with the crowd. I mean, nobody wants to be the guy who survives the mass suicide, because that makes you out to be a coward. So I think there is this
they were pushing that, you're killing your grandma by not wearing a mask. Like, but see, that was that was the whole thing. It was like, you're going to make everybody else sick if you don't do this. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, that's appealing to people's better nature. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we're talking about karmic blowback, like getting people to, potentially harm themselves to save grandma that is appealing to people's better nature, even if it's wrong-headed. So I don't know if there'd be a psychic blowback from that aspect of it. I do think
you're
that
hurting
there's
you
a
because
bunch
you're doing it to yourself. So the people that want you to do it to yourself don't get the blowback, because you just made the blowback and you put it on yourself.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess you could argue it's a form of self-sacrifice.
Right. Just like the Mayans, you had to sacrifice yourself for him to chop your head off.
Well, they didn't sacrifice themselves, though. They captured neighboring tribes and, killed those guys instead.
I'm sure there was, that's the Mel Gibson movie, but...
That's why the conquistadors were able to win, because all the other tribes were like, we don't like these guys either. Can we join your team?
They still had people that did it themselves.
I don't know.
Sacrificed.
That I don't know. I mean, that's possible. That kind of hysteria might create sycophants that would.
Yeah, I mean, it's what societies do, man. It's a pattern. It happens over and over and over again.
The sacrifice, the culture self-sacrificing itself.
The self-sacrifice. It just depends on how the evil people want to do it, and like what that society is used to, like the technologies they have, and
Mm-hmm. I have a little bit of a different take on that. I don't think a culture gets in danger until it's willing to sacrifice its posterity, like its kids. That's where it starts getting dangerous, because, well, I mean, you look at the abortion thing, that's indicative of sacrificing yourself.
Because kids have free will, so you're going to get blowback for that.
Yeah, you're
corrupting someone's free will.
Right. But it manifests in ways that I think people don't realize are frighteningly practical. So not only are you going to have abortion, you're going to have something like $32 trillion in debt. I mean, why do you think we have that? Because there's a bunch of greedy people that are willing to run up the debt and crash the purchasing power of the dollar and basically enslave their kids to corporations and whatnot in the name of maintaining a current way of life for themselves. So it's an attitude that manifests not just in the I'm got to think about this carefully. Not just in like the spiritual realm or in some way where the Almighty is going to like create earthquakes or something. It manifests in the way people make decisions, and not just in abortion, but of finances and the way businesses are set up. Another fantastic example of this attitude is selling cows. Dad's a farmer. And the way that we've gotten such large herds is we have an inn with the Joplin Sale Barn, which is one of the larger sale barns in the world. And so we get access to a lot of good deals. Well, the reason it's so hard for other people to build their farms up is because there's this nasty little group of old men who have been there for forever and an eon. And what they'll do is when they smell new blood coming in to try to buy cows and establish their own herd, they'll bid on that cow that guy wants and jack up the price. And they frame it as paying the play, but what it is keeping the guy out of the game. It's limiting the competition. And so, of course, when you do that, what happens is the big guys that are bigger than that crotchety group of old men, those big companies will conglomerate, and then all of a sudden you've got Brahms owning the largest dairy farm in the world, and people are wondering why, the local farms are dying. It's like, well, you keep running all the new guys off that want to start the local farms, you idiots.
Yep.
And so it's this attitude of like just, taking advantage of and, tormenting, if you will, the younger generations, the posterity. And just keep, in order to maintain your own status. It's not even, these guys have more than enough money. They've got their own cows. They've established their own way of life, as it were. But it's just the idea of somebody else coming up and possibly rivaling them. And they want to keep those guys under the thumb. And you sacrifice the kids because they're naturally weaker than you because they haven't had as much time in society to build their wealth up. And so you do that enough, well, then the bigger dogs than you will take away what you have. But these guys don't realize that. And so this attitude of sacrificing your children to maintain your way of life manifests not just in abortion, but in financial ways, and it'll ultimately cause a society to implode.
Yeah.
Which we are currently doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening right now. And I think that's why we're in the situation we're in, politically speaking.
Yep.
So...
Well, not to mention, it goes all the way down to, local gas stations.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that nobody wants to work there. It's that you can't live off of what they pay you when you start working there.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't. The problem with the fiat currency thing is, of course, inflation goes up, your purchasing power goes down, but the wages don't climb with it. And so...
Yep. Well, even if you bring up the wages, then that company is just going to be like, oh, well, I'll just bring up my prices, and then I'll continue to make what I'm making.
Right.
And then everyone else around brings all their prices up, and it just keeps going up. And it doesn't matter. You could bring the minimum wage higher than ever, and it still doesn't help because all these big companies are like, oh, we're just going to keep raising our prices.
Yeah, well, you don't need to bring up the minimum wage. Like, you don't need a government requirement, but it should just be common sense that people need enough money to live. And if they, if they don't have enough money to live, they're going to go work somewhere else. Exactly. Or they're going to quit, or they're going to try to, heck, they'll go mow lawns and collect cash under the table to dodge the IRS. They'll do what they have to survive, but the companies, they die, particularly the small companies, the mid-range companies, they die. And then the big companies consolidate, and then they arbitrarily set the rates in ways that have nothing to do with market value. And so it's like, it's keeping the prices at a certain level where some kid can actually get an apartment and not have to live off ramen noodles is part of how you maintain small businesses in the first place, ironically.
Yep.
But, people are just trying to maximize their own, and everybody's like that. And there's, people have the right to set their wages however they want. And I don't think having the government come in and arbitrarily set that stuff's going to fix things. But that it's an idea that I think Tocqueville had. Tocqueville said that capitalism is a great market system, but it only works if you have a virtuous society, because people have to understand the value of things like remembering your posterity. remembering to maintain the quality of life of your employee, for example, and not creating indentured servants, more or less, and not creating situations where people, like, for example, so before COVID nuked the world, I think it was the banking industry, the apartment industry, and the tourism industry were all getting together in Rogers, Northwest Arkansas. And they were talking about building the home office. And what they were doing was they were talking about building apartments and setting up restaurants, but in preparation for the home office. But what they wanted was they wanted all those millennials to come into those apartments. And I bet you dollars to donuts, as it were, that the idea was you set the wages for these guys just enough for them to get an apartment and go eat, and then no more. And what they were going to do is they were essentially going to set up a nice ghetto for a bunch of millennials at that home office. But they weren't going to pay, they weren't going to pay the bottom rungs enough to actually live and save up money and get wealth of their own. And, the way that the corporate structure is set up anymore, you can't climb the ladder like you could 20 years ago. So it was, we're seeing the reintroduction of indentured servitude through hourly wages in a way that hasn't been traditionally seen before, because the current people in charge aren't really remembering their posterity or not understanding the value of making sure people, have a comfort. Like, they don't understand that the most expensive thing in a company is your turnover. Like, they don't remember that. And so they make these wages impossible. They make the living conditions impossibly low. So you're getting either high school kids or junkies, which jumps up their turnover rate, costs them more money in the long run, makes them feel like they have to keep the late wages low so they have to be able to afford, so they can afford everything. But they don't realize if they would just pay people enough money to actually live, then they wouldn't have that turnover rate. They wouldn't have that expense. Everybody would actually be able to live, and you just have an actual stable company. That's why Chick-fil-A works. That's why Hobby Lobby worked and Mardell's worked. They pay those people enough wages so that the turnover rate isn't absolutely insane, and they're actually able to have a functional company that way.
Or Buc-ee's.
Or Buc-ee's. Yeah, Buc-ee's has a good system as well.
Yeah, Brahms is great, dude.
Brahms?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that, yeah. Well, if they do, great. I mean, but the thing is,
their managers make, I think, over $100,000 a year.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But
all their locally sourced meat and all that stuff, that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. But those companies are the exception; they're not the norm.
Yeah,
and that's why you have a lot of the economic conditions that we have right now.
Yep.
Because the problem with all these chart people is that they don't understand the stuff that you can't really chart in terms of expense, like turnover being the prime example. You can't chart how much money you're actually losing by having another guy go train another guy and then having that guy quit and then having somebody else train that guy, and how much time and money you're losing in that. Like, there's no chart to actually track what your turnover is costing you. And so they don't factor that into their calculus when they're setting these wages. So... Well, anyway, back to Halloween, unless somebody else has some sort of thought to add to that.
I forgot about Halloween.
Yeah, we went on a completely different rabbit trail there. So, anybody else got any final thoughts before we go back to the video?
I don't think so.
Don't think so?
Candy corn?
Candy corn. I like candy corn, but most people think it ought to be eradicated from the Halloween... tradition.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll go back to this 9:35.
A calculated move to redirect the devotion of the people, from spirits and fairies to saints and the blessed dead. But it did not end there. To follow All Saints' Day, the Church added All Souls' Day on November 2nd, a day to pray for the souls still trapped in purgatory, wandering between this life and the next. In doing so, they transformed a pagan night of thin veils into a Christian observance of the afterlife. Yet the night before these holy days remained untamed, All Hallows' Eve. The Church's intent was clear, to sanctify a time of year thick with pagan ritual. But old beliefs have a way of surviving beneath the cloak of new faith. All Hallows' Eve, later shortened to Halloween, became a strange hybrid, a night that retained its ancient roots. Bonfires still flickered on hillsides. Candles still burned to guide the lost souls home. And children still roamed the night in disguise, now cloaked as saints or devils rather than spirits or fairies. It was a night of dualities, where reverence for the holy dead brushed shoulders with the lingering dread of what else might be wandering in the dark. For while the saints and martyrs were invoked with solemn prayers, the people knew that the unseen forces of the world did not simply vanish. Witches, demons, and spirits of the wild still lurked, woven into the fabric of these new...
All demons. I'm just going to say it again. All demons. No spirits of the dead, just demons. What do you think about witches, though? Do you think those witches back then were a thing? Were they actually real, or were they just,
No, I think they were herbalists that were putting pharmacists out of business.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I have not heard that. Okay, tell me about that.
It's an idea. I mean, it's like it's still happening.
Okay.
Like
Oh, yeah.
the people who try to put out a patent for a cure for cancer get killed. It's a witch hunt. It's just they can do it through patents now, and it's easier.
Okay, I've got a couple questions there. I've heard rumors of the people being killed that have cures for cancer. Like, do you have any specific stories regarding that?
No, I pulled that out of the air.
You pulled that out of the air? I mean, I've heard that. So I didn't know if you had a story.
Just
or not.
like Stanley Meyer, he invented the hydrogen generator,
Okay.
and he as soon as he tried to put out a patent for it, he got killed.
Stanley Meyer. Okay, I've heard that story. I didn't know the guy's
He was
name.
running cars on water.
So I believe you. I'm just curious, is there any like documentation about that, or
Stanley Meyer.
Yeah, about Stanley Meyer. Like,
I can look
what's
for some stuff on it.
Please do, and please send that to me, because I've heard, I've heard stories, I've heard rumors, I've never gotten the specifics on that. Now, where did you hear about the witches thing, being herbalists?
I don't know.
Okay, that's a very interesting idea. We should look up, because I've not heard that theory before. I really didn't know why that happened.
Well, I mean, if you look at modern day, it's just called New Age. Look into New Age. Any type of New Age. It's the same thing. It's called New Age.
Is it New Age or New Age?
Age.
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 Okay. All right. Yeah. I hear like the New Age stuff is just like pagan spirituality stuff. Is that not right?
It's the same thing as what we're going over right now.
So it's the
just
pagan traditions?
It's called the same stuff. Or it's all the same stuff. It's just called New Age.
Okay.
Which stuff?
All of it. The herbalist stuff is in there. All the spiritual, hunting ghosts and practicing on a Ouija board and all of it. It's
Just
all
truth.
It's all mixed in together.
Truth.
Well, it shouldn't be mixed in together. I think, finding an herb that'll cure cancer is a little bit better than talking on a Ouija board.
Right, but
It's the knowledge of good and evil. It's neither good nor bad. It's how you use it.
So Are we saying that hidden knowledge is just being packaged as New Age right now?
Well,
Just
the witchcraft side of things, basically.
Well, I don't know if
keep it simple.
herbalism is
Keep it
like.
simple.
I don't know if herbalism is like considered witchcraft though.
To some, it's called witchcraft.
Well, to a news channel that's bought off by a pharmaceutical company is gonna call it witchcraft.
Okay.
I mean, it's like his story. It's whoever won.
Yeah, I know they kind of
writes down the history.
I know they refer to it as pseudoscience. I've never heard
They're going to call them witches
witchcraft, but
because they don't want people to do it again.
well, that's an interesting idea. I've always kind of wondered if maybe there was something to the witch thing, like the witches were actually able to do something. Because C.S. Lewis had an interesting quote. I think it was A Mere Christianity. He said, people are not bothered by by the idea of burning witches. Like, people holler about the tragedy and how horrible it was and all this, and he's like, that's not the problem. The moral atrocity is not burning witch. They're not offended because people burned witches, because if you actually believe there is a demon-possessed woman that can wipe out an entire town with a plague, you better believe you're going to kill her with fire. But if you don't actually believe that stuff exists, then yeah, something like that would seem like an atrocity. That was the quote. So I've always wondered if there was something that sparked that hysteria, let's say, and how legitimate that something is, I don't know. So,
well, I mean, there's the case of I don't remember where it was or when it was. It's the I think Rogan talked about it a few times. It's about the wheat and the psychedelic grows in the wheat because it got moldy.
Okay.
And the whole town like freaked out when they were eating the bread, and they killed a couple of people and called them witches.
I have not heard that. That's interesting.
You haven't?
No, but that's very interesting.
I can't remember the name of the psychedelic that it grew, but yeah, it was like moldy wheat, and it grew a psychedelic, and so they were all just tripping all the time for like weeks.
That's crazy.
Because they were eating that bread.
Huh. I think that's a plausible idea. That absolutely could happen.
It could all come from that.
Possible.
Just a few little stories like that got wrote down, and they're like, yeah, let's use this idea. And so people just go with it because that's what people do.
That's possible. I'll tell you from my perspective, I've read a few firsthand accounts of like vampirism. And the thing that always annoyed me is like, first of all, I'm kind of like, my opinion on vampires is kind of like my opinion on Bigfoots. I don't really care. But what always annoyed me when I read those accounts is, if you go to the History Channel, they'll sit there and they'll say, oh, well, they just didn't understand the decomposition process. They didn't know that bodies bloat and fingernails and hair grow after you die and all this. And I'm like, they lived during the plague. Of course they knew about that stuff. Are you stupid? And that's not what the first-hand accounts say they did anyway. The first-hand accounts are like, they lined up a bunch of bodies that had all died at the same time, with the express purpose of measuring the decomposition rate. That's why they did that. And what they found with these abnormal bodies was they didn't age like the other ones. They were engorged with blood, unlike the other ones. And then the hair grew, and then the nails grew, and whenever they hit them with the stake, they didn't just go, because of some expulsion of air, because they popped a lung with a stick or something. No, the freaking creature would grab the stick, or at least in one account, one of the vampires grabbed a stick as they were pounding it into its chest and said, thanks for the stick, now I've got something to beat the dogs with. And so that's a little more, now these are judges and lawyers writing these first-hand accounts. That's a little bit more than just the decomposition rate and not understanding the proper science at the time. I don't know what it was. Not sure I really care what it was. But it's not what the History Channel was telling you. That these poor dumb pagans or poor dumb peasants didn't understand what the heck a corpse did when it died. Whatever was happening, it wasn't that. And so it goes back to this idea that everybody before the light bulb was an idiot, and that just annoys me.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah, so I don't know what brought on the witch hysteria. I just know that people were way smarter than we give them credit for. And I would even go as far as to say that they were smarter than us. Because frankly, yeah, okay, you can turn on a light bulb. Good job. So can a monkey. Try making a light bulb. And for another thing, has anybody read the Federalist Papers?
No.
Those things were written for drunk people in taverns back in the 1700s. We study them in college. How smart are we really?
Right. Yeah.
It just drives me nuts. This idea that everybody before us was an idiot drives me nuts. I'm sorry?
Bach and Mozart, that music, dude, it matches with the stars and stuff. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, those people were brilliant. Probably because they didn't have television and light bulbs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, back to Halloween again.
Oh man.
All right, I'm at 11:01.
Celebrations. The church's holy days had not erased the fear. They had only given it new shapes and names. In medieval Europe, this dual nature flourished. The faithful lit candles in cathedrals for lost souls, while outside, the fires still roared against the black of night, warding off things older and darker than any Christian prayer could name. People spoke of saints, but also whispered of witches.
Okay, shut up. Anyway. Oh, yeah, because the church, is so young. So.
How do they know what people spoke of?
Oh, they don't. They have no blasted clue. Oh, that pesky church and its new ways just didn't understand the brilliance of the pagans. But
Yeah.
anyhow. Okay.
It seems like a silly AI video.
It's striking me as an AI video.
I think it is, bro.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
I agree. I think we are done with this fine piece of art.
We're all done with AI. Move on.
Yeah. So next time we are going to talk about Anton LaVey being killed because he was astro projecting like an idiot. And so we're going to discuss that next time. So guys, thank you very much for watching. And we will see you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.